Hello and what is going on today, guys? Tomcat here and welcome to a brand new video in SpinTires MudRunner where we're going to be taking a look at a brand new work in progress mod from Risky, which is a Suburban. It's huge, it's on big tires, it sounds like it's been diesel swapped, and let's go ahead and get right into it. And we're also going to be testing it out on a brand new map, which is kind of weird and a little over the top, but it sort of works at the same time. So when you start this thing up for the first time, you see that there is a lot of fuel that can be filled into the back. I'm not sure if that's his final place for the fuel tanks, but that's where they are right now. You can actually, you can check this thing out right now. Just keep in mind, like I said, it is a work in progress. There is a trailer option that you can actually go ahead and run with if you want to. There's really no crazy options that you can, that you can do. Like there's no real big. There's no real big deal, about the trailer. Like, you can't really do much with it. It doesn't have a lot of, like, features except for the fact that it carries a bunch of repair points, and it has, like, I believe fuel that you can do as well. But the main thing that we want to know about is how this thing performs. Now, it gets up to 5th gear very, very quickly, and this map is actually a really good testing ground for things like ground clearance and approach angles and stuff like that, because right off the bat, it puts you into scenarios like this. And you can see we're already scraping the rear bumper, but the front bumper didn't actually get scraped all that bad. So you're going to scrape the rear more than you scrape the front with this rig. It's definitely going to be a lot more, well, I wouldn't say rear heavy because you've got the engine up front, but as far as as far as angles go, your departure angle is going to be a lot more likely to scrape than your approach. Now, let's just see what happens if we dip off into this little hole right here. See if we can... Oh, so the suspension actually has a good amount of flex to it. I was trying to see if it would roll over, and it didn't actually. I was expecting it to kind of topple over on its side, but it didn't. The driver does poke through the roof a little bit, which is a little bit odd to me. I'm kind of surprised at that. But again, you have to kind of take everything with a grain of salt because it is a work-in-progress build. And you can also see underneath that there are certain parts of the drivetrain that are not textured. So that's also something you have to kind of approach with the idea of, yes, this is a work-in-progress, and I can't judge it like I would judge a fully released mod. But what really does stand out to me is the body, the body and suspension control. I like it. It's not, overly flexible, but at the same time, it's very well controlled. Like, you can put this thing into situations where you would think a top-heavy rig like this would just fall over, and it actually doesn't fall over. It's pretty well balanced in that regard. And I think with it being well balanced, it opens itself up to being practical as a trail vehicle. And, trail vehicle, scout vehicle, maybe even a rescue vehicle. And normally we don't get vehicles like this in MudRunner. Normally what we get is trucks. Normally we don't get, the big full-size SUVs that are on truck frames like this big Suburban. And I'm actually really glad that he kind of went out on a limb and made this thing, because it shows that these can be useful and they can be applied to a lot of different scenarios within the game. And I think that there's a lot to be said for like these big body SUVs when they're used in an off-road application. I mean, we've seen several people make the old ones, but nobody has made these new ones. And by the way, this thing does have an interior view. It's not anywhere close to being done yet, but it's there, and I just think it's cool for the fact that it's there and he's even making one. So once he actually finishes that, I think it'll be really, really cool. Now, as far as rocks go and traction on the rocks, it's good. It's really good. And the transmission programming is good too, because you can really just leave it in automatic mode. I mean, we're still in 3rd, and it'll only go back to 1st when it absolutely needs to. And let's see if we can get... So the change down to 1st was pretty seamless. I mean, it didn't stop and make us kind of, it didn't stop and make us hesitate for a second as it switched down into 1st. Ooh, that was getting close to the edge. That was getting really close to the edge. And it's a good-looking rig. Like, with these tires, I think it could do with some bigger fenders to kind of accommodate these tires a little better, because as you can see, they do clip through the front bumper. But I understand, again, that this is a work-in-progress build, so I'm not going to be too harsh on things like, tires clipping the body or rubbing and stuff like that. But I do think it's something that he needs to consider for future reference. Now, I do think it should be noted for other mod makers that people want these. I wanted one of these, but nobody ever made one. And then now the fact that he made one is kind of like, oh wow, yeah, I could really see myself using this in actual gameplay. Just as a, like, what would you rather have? Think about it. What would you rather have? Like a UAZ or this? I mean, and the American Wilds expansion with the Hummer and stuff like that does make, the Hummer makes a good case for itself. The K5 makes a good case for itself because those are factory vehicles that are really, really, really good. But say, for example, if you're playing, a American Wilds map with modded vehicles, I would love to have this thing in there. The main reason why I picked this map over an American Wilds map is because I wanted to show you guys from a performance standpoint what this vehicle was capable of and not just show it to you from an aesthetic standpoint, because showing things to you from an aesthetic standpoint is great and all, but I really want you guys to kind of go home with a with an idea of actual vehicle performance, because if you are debating on whether or not you want to download a mod, I mean, like, sometimes you don't have a ton of space to download mods, and you want to know, like, okay, is this mod decent? Is this mod worth actually, like, possibly clogging up my computer? And this one, I would say that if you want to wait until he fully releases it, until he finishes it, that would be fine. I'm sure it's going to be even more polished when it's finished. But if you want to kind of get a bit of an early jump on this particular mod itself and play around with this rig, then I would suggest getting in on it and just checking it out, because, again, it is a work in progress, but it's very, it's very well made, in my opinion. And I think that, yes, there's some aesthetics that need to be worked on, but the performance is really good. The transmission is really good. I think the engine performance is balanced. I know there are going to be people out there that are going to say it's too fast. I say that that's kind of a bit of a... I feel like that's kind of a bit of a bad way to look at this vehicle. I'm not saying that it's a bad, stance to have, but at the same time, when you look at every vehicle that can go over, any vehicle that's faster than, let's say, slow, and just say, oh, it's too fast, oh, it's too fast, oh, it's too fast, I think you're forgetting the fact that these are modified road vehicles. So their top speed shouldn't necessarily be stupid slow. It should be, their top speed should be what it can do out on the highway. And, if you want to, like, if you're inclined to attempt to hit that out here in the woods, you can. You just have to know ahead of time that you might break stuff. Now, I'm not going to break anything because I have MudRunner mod running. But at the same time, think about it from the standpoint of, instead of just, being able to floor it and the vehicle just crawling around everywhere, you have to actually be conscious of your throttle inputs and be like, okay, is this the right amount of throttle to give at this particular time? I like this, by the way, how you have to cross the top of that waterfall. That's quite cool. I do think at the end of the day, like, yes, this is definitely more of a testing ground style map and not a realistic style map. It's not a realistic map at all. With that being said, again, I like it from the standpoint of performance testing. But I think that, performance testing you can only do so much of before you're like, okay, I want a realistic map now. But in terms of showing a mod, I think it works out really well. I like the suspension, too. It's not too stiff, and that was one of the biggest things I was worried about. I was worried that it was going to bounce around and be super, super unhappy with bumps, and I'm really happy to report that it doesn't. It's actually really well controlled over the bumps. I mean, yeah, if you hit a bump hard enough, yeah, it's going to come up on, 2-3 wheels, but it's also not going to flip over at the mere sight of a rock. You know what I'm saying? Like, because some vehicles do. Some vehicles flip over instantly when they touch a rock at any sort of speed, which is not realistic. And I think, depending on what kind of build you're dealing with, it may be more or less realistic. But this is definitely, I think, I would say it's on the more arcadey side of realistic, but definitely not arcadey to the point where it's like unbearably arcadey. Does that make any sense? Like, it's not, so unrealistic that it's bothersome or annoying, but it's also arcadey enough to be fun. And I think that that's one of the biggest takeaways here is this is fun to drive. It's very, very, very fun to drive. And when a vehicle is fun to drive, that makes you want to use it. That makes you want to drive it. That makes you want to go and play around with it instead of just, letting it sit in your garage with all the rest of your mods that sit there because they're not fun to drive. And fun to drive vehicles are the reason why I keep coming back to certain mods. And that's the reason why I will come back to this mod. It's fun to drive. And I think at the end of the day, you know, I mean, you can have the best textures, you can have the best modeling, and if it's not fun to drive, people aren't going to mess with it. You know, they might download it once just to look at it and take some pictures with it, but then they're going to end up not using it because it's not enjoyable. And this, I think, on the other hand, you know, he's focused more on the gameplay aspect of the vehicle rather than kind of, you know, the aesthetic part of the vehicle. I mean, yes, the aesthetics will come with, you know, a final version of this vehicle, but I love the gameplay, and I think it drives really well, and it fits really well into the idea of the game, and I'm actually having a really good time with it out here in this desert section. I had never messed around with the desert section before, and actually, I chucked it hard to the left, and I thought that's the way the road went. I couldn't see the road. I thought that was the way it went, and it wasn't, but I expected that thing to flip. I expected it to dig into the ground and flip. I expected the two front tires to dig into the ground, flip over, and then that would be that. But it didn't, and that's really good. That's really surprising. I'm enjoying this map, dude. Like, this map is fun. And again, it's not realistic, but it's really, really enjoyable. Especially if you want to just have a pure testing ground, like just bring something out and just hoon about. You can do that all you want out here. You can do that all day long. And it's cool because it goes from, like, you know, suspension testing to, you could do speed testing, you could do like different types of suspension testing, like you can do you can go from like flexibility testing to jump testing, you know what I mean? Like you can go all over the map with every kind of, you know, every type of testing you want to do with vehicles. They've got some mud, not really a lot, but the mud that they do have is kind of good enough, I think, for this scenario, and it works. But mud isn't really the focus of this map. And we're still barreling through. We went into those rocks. Like, it just shifted up to third. It just shifted up to fourth. It's staying in fourth, doing this. And then just now it went back to first. That's so crazy. The fact that it's actually willing to do that, and it's not, you know, it's not going to just, like, tell you to stop and then just basically spit you out and be like, okay, no, yeah, you're done here. You know what I mean? It's not like that. It really does work well. Go up. Oh, God. That was close. That was hella close. I kind of like how the trail is not all marked, too. I like how some of it you have to kind of work your way up through. You kind of have to figure out where you're actually going. And that's a cool gameplay dynamic. It adds a little bit of exploration factor to, you know, to the map itself, to where you're not just following a trail. But yeah, I like this rig, especially for it being a work in progress rig. It's a really good rig, and it's a really fun rig to drive. And I got to set the parking brake because I don't want it to roll away. But I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, don't forget to click that like button. Let me know in the comment section below if there are any mods you would like me to test or highlight. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe for daily Forza, MudRunner, and much, much more. So I will talk to you guys next time. See y'all later.